gonna start over.
Okay.
Well,
That was a little...
I quit.
No! You can't
out.
quit.
A vampire witch.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Welcome. Hi.
Do you guys have a blooper
I'm
reel
gonna
yet?
let you
Because
just
I
go.
feel like you
You
should.
just go. I'm sure we have enough content
We
to
do.
make one. Yeah.
We do. This is our first episode in our Interview with a Witch series. So today we are meeting with Miss Shayla.
Hi.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Shayla, before we actually get into the interview.
God, I hate these questions. Like you start questioning everything about your existence.
You're like, who am I?
am
I?
Who actually am I?
Oh God. So my name is Shayla. I have been practicing for several years. Kind of something that I started dabbling in when I was really young, like in my teens. And we'll get kind of further in with the interview, like why I drifted away and came back to it later in life, and have been following the path since then. Because it wasn't as, what is the word I'm looking for? It wasn't as not necessarily taboo, but it wasn't as like gate kept when I explored it in my later years.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I survive on caffeine and sarcasm. And that's really all you need to know.
That's who I am.
That's
I
who
am.
she is. That's all I need to know. So how because you and Alyssa have known each other for a little bit longer than you and I have known each other. So how did you guys meet?
So we met through circus arts, actually.
Mhm.
I went to, it was probably like my third or fourth class, and you and another mutual friend were in the same class, and I was just like, how do I become friends with those people? They look so cool.
Little did you know.
I am fairly uncool. How do I make this happen?
How do I be cool too?
Little did I know, they were also fatally uncool.
Yes.
And we became really cool together.
Mhm.
So, and it actually, in conversations that Alyssa and I have had, it wasn't until years into our friendship that we both found out that we were witches.
Mhm.
Not only that, but it was years after that we both found out that we work with the same deity.
Yeah.
Because we were like, it was to the point of where, because of the experiences I've had in the past, I am so solitary to the point where I'm almost a hermit,
Mhm.
where I don't want to talk to people about it because I know what I do feels right, and I don't really feel like somebody telling me that it's wrong.
Right.
And it was really refreshing to hear that Alyssa had a lot of the same kind of feelings, and then also worked with the same person, and we had a lot of really similarities in our practices, and it was like, oh,
This whole time.
this whole
This
time,
whole
oh my
time.
God.
That's so funny.
It's funny that you say that though about it being like a very protected thing for you, because it's like listening to talk. I'm like, I wonder what that feels like. It's
Revert to previous episodes.
Yeah. It's interesting how all of us through our friendships have gone years and years and years without, like, I feel like to some degree.
Yeah.
But it's like to
You
keep
don't-
that so.
Yeah, you don't want to dig.
Yeah.
Because you're like, if they wanted to talk about it, they would talk about it with me. So
Yeah.
it's like you don't want to question, and you don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, like we talked about before. Like,
No, and on top of that, like, you don't want to feel like you're prying that person, like you
Yes.
guys had talked about.
yeah.
And you don't want to feel like, at least for me, I have a lot of anxiety when it comes to like having conversation, and a lot of it was, growing up. I grew up Irish Catholic, so there's the Catholic guilt is a very real thing.
Mhm.
And not only that, but like for lack of a better term, not knowing something immediately. A lot of it, when I first started to like get really interested in, witchcraft as a whole, it was a lot of gatekeeping. It was a lot of, well, how do you not know this weird niche thing?
Yeah.
Like, you're not a real witch.
Yeah.
And so that was ingrained in me as well. And so it's been really difficult for me to like be like, I don't know this, or this is what this means to me. This isn't the traditional like symbolism tied behind it or the traditional connotation, but this is what it means to me, and that's okay.
Yeah. But I mean, it is okay. It 100% is okay.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's more powerful than like you being drawn to something and doing it because it feels right to you is more powerful than like flipping through a book and being like, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to do it.
Hi, Beowulf.
I'm gonna check the shot just to make sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of Freya, cats.
Maybe he just needs to sit with us for a second.
You just want some cuddles, Beowulf? You want some attention? You want to say hello? Say hello!
Bubby. Bubby. He's like, I'm the star of the show. Okay, bye. So, Shayla, why don't you tell us about what is your practice?
So my practice deals a lot with runes, and reading them either for myself and doing a lot of introspective work. Especially I'm called to it when I'm hitting just mental blocks and I can't figure out what's going on. I've done rune readings for other people. So a lot of my practice focuses on that aspect of divination.
Okay.
Just kind of connecting. I've had connections with Freya. I've also had connections with Odin, and it was something that I've talked to Alyssa about where it's been really strange and kind of like not uncomfortable but unexpected, because a lot of people when they have these, they speak of their interactions with Odin, they say he's this very intimidating presence, that they are a lot of like that warrior aspect of it where it's just like, oh fuck. And when I had those interactions with him, when I had the experiences with him that I had, it was more the like fatherly like knowledge aspect, and I don't know if it was because I was also working with Freya, like she was like, hey, I have a friend you need to meet. And working in that divination, but it was just this really warm, encompassing like father, like putting the father in all father.
Hey.
So those are the two main deities I've worked with. I've worked with Frigg. That's actually how I got married back in October, and that's exactly how we started our hand fasting, was a opening with a prayer to Frigg.
So beautiful.
Thanks. And so, like I said, a lot of my practice deals with that, and just start like working and incorporating different animal aspects into my practice. When I was really, really young, and this is just kind of like one of those like, it makes sense now.
Oh, yeah.
My grandparents owned like 32 acres of land, and I would just go out. I would pack my breakfast and I would just go out into these 32 acres and just interact with the squirrels and the wild turkeys, because they lived in Maine. There were deer, there were bear, there were moose, there were all sorts of woodland creatures, and I was living my best Disney princess life.
Oh my gosh.
But so there were some of them that were familiar enough with, because they lived out in the middle of nowhere, that they would come into my grandparents' actual like yard area, and just growing up, I'm like, oh, that makes sense now. And beginning to work those, elements into my own practices, and still figuring out how they fit in exactly, but beginning to test those waters as well.
Yeah.
It's so funny when you like, I don't know, when you grow up and you think back to like your start and your beginning, and it's like
that meme where it was like, when you were little and you used to like take like the flower petals and make like potions in your backyard, and then you grew up to be a witch, and you're like, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, it does. Like,
we were actually talking about this
last night.
I asked Tori, I was like, do you ever remember not feeling like a witch, like ever in this life?
That's interesting. See, I, like you, grew up in really strong religion, but I grew up as an Irish Catholic, so it was instilled like literally from birth.
Yeah.
And it was very strong. It was very, when I was young, my mom worked in a Catholic bookstore in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, that no longer exists.
Myrtle Beach.
Dirty Myrtle.
And I remember feeling like just kind of complacent with it. Like, it wasn't something that I fit in with. you know, I fit in with it because I was told I needed to fit in with it. But it wasn't something that I was like, this resonates with me.
Yeah.
The only time I really had that moment was when I got confirmed as a Catholic, and it wasn't even the confirmation. It was the saint, because I guess a Catholic, when you get confirmed, you can choose the name of a saint to take on as a second middle name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started researching saints and finding one that resonated with me. And essentially the one I found that resonated with me was the Catholic witch. But they didn't call it that.
Yeah.
You know. And I didn't realize it at the time that that's what that was, because I still have, I had until very recently a Bible that was dedicated to that particular saint. And so going back and like remembering, you know, certain passages or certain like her backstory, I'm like, it's really been glaringly obvious the whole time.
Yeah.
The whole time. But I remember I can say for a lot of my experiences, like especially, you know, working in the Catholic faith or being raised in a Catholic faith, they say the whole Catholic guilt, like it's a real thing. But for a majority, if not all of that time of my life, like I definitely remember feeling more guilt than Catholic. Because all of these rules, figures, whatever, that are set in place, and not feeling that you fulfill any of those or what is meant to be a good Catholic, and feeling guilt about that. And a lot of just like self like loathing, I guess is a better the best word I can think of. Because I'm like, oh well, this is, you know, these are all the characteristics of what makes a good human. I am none of these things. I am zero of these things.
I am garbage person.
I'm garbage.
I am garbage human.
Cue Alanis.
Which is interesting, like, given your background in that, I was going to ask, like, if you tie in any of your Catholic heritage into your practice.
Not a single bit.
But because of that, I
do, yeah. So I do work with a few, Celtic deities and work in some of those traditional Celtic practices. Like my entire hand fasting was an amalgamation of like Nordic practices and Celtic practices, which have a lot of similarities already, and just kind of marrying those.
While you were getting married.
While I was getting 10 points.
It just clicked. That was a good one.
But yeah, I don't work any of the traditional Catholic beliefs into my practice. For me, it was something that I never felt like I truly belonged. So why would I bring that into a practice that I'm making my own?
Exactly. And I feel like
why would I bring that guilt back into it when I'm finally finding the strength in my own practice and finding my strength as a witch to say, this is what I do.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting because, like, there are people that tie in their Christian heritage and background and their start into their practice, but I think it all comes from what did you feel when you were in that practice originally. Like for me, I was in Methodist, I was Southern Baptist, like...
Oh, so you had the hellfire and all the brimstone.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. So I don't tie any of that into any of my practice because of the way it made me feel then.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to feel like that now.
Exactly.
But I feel like people who do tie it in, it's because they don't have those, like, triggers.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And, even though they identify as a witch, or they are a witch, rather, they might still feel those connections to those Christian deities or those, other... Yeah, monster?
So, why don't you tell us a little bit, like, what do you feel like in your practice? What is your, like, power, your strength?
Ooh. Cryfest 2020.
No!
My power, I feel like a lot comes from just the past experiences that I've had. And finding the power within, like, myself. A lot of my work, especially the past year, has been, for lack of a better term, like shadow work, just like digging everything up. And it's been a bumpy road. But I feel like I definitely came out on the other side. Like, I'm able to when I do rune readings, like, it's not as muddy for me anymore. Like, it's definitely like oh, okay. Like, it's no longer, oh, it could mean this, it could mean this. Like, it's very like, all right, I see you. Mm-hmm. You think the tarot cards like to call you out. I find power in the connection that I've, forged and created and fostered and nurtured with Freya. Yeah. And that, it's kind of like when people talk about their relationship with Hecate, and she's very much like not a coddling figure. Mm-hmm. It's very much like, I've given you the shit, why haven't you done it? Like, yeah. I've given you the resources, why haven't you done it? And my interactions with Freya have been very similar, where it's like, I know that you're better than this, I know you're capable of more than this, why aren't you doing it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it definitely lit a fire under me to be like, okay, I got it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mom,
ma'am.
I can do this. Okay, Mom, I got it. And, just kind of from past life experiences I've had, it's been kind of like one of those moments where, like, you're a strong female, I need you to start acting like it. Yeah. Like, you're more than what your experiences have been, and you're more than what you feel like you're worth. So I'm gonna need you to start acting like it. And it's been a struggle. It's been a bumpy road. But a lot of it has also been finding strength in what small witch community I do have, and finding those I can actually, like, openly talk about my practice with, and unabashedly go to people with questions, or, hey, I've had this weird experience, have you had it too? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Finding out people have had the same experiences, or been like, okay, I have too, but this is what that meant for me, what does that mean for you? And finding strength in being able to have that open dialogue, where I'm very much trying to take my hermitiness and not be so much a hermit. Yeah. Like, forcing myself out of my shell. Yeah. And finding the strength in that, because I'm very much an introvert at my heart and soul. So a lot of me just wants to be like, nope, don't say anything. Just go in what I lovingly refer to as my room of requirement, which is literally just turned into a room of altars.
Bookcases of altars.
Literally. And just kind of, like, stowing away in there. But I also, like, as a solitary practitioner, I love having that alone time. Like, I love talking about those experiences with people, but I love having those experiences to myself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Because for me, like, my power and my strength, whether it be with my ancestors, I talk to my grandmother a lot on my father's side. And it's really funny because I had this really intense dream a couple nights ago. Leading up to the wedding, I was talking to my grandmother a lot. Her birthday is on Samhain, and she passed away when I was younger. But for whatever reason, as I was getting ready for this wedding, like, I just felt this connection. And I have all of her old teacups and all of my grandfather's old coffee mugs. And so as I was getting ready for the wedding, like, I would always put out a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Because when I was little, we'd always share a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. So, like, as I'm pulling these all-nighters, like, engraving runes on the bones for everybody, like, I would sip my coffee and, like, set it down for her and continue a little bit, and then take a little bit and let her have some. And I didn't really connect with my grandfather much, but I was talking with my grandmother almost every day. And, like, I had this really intense dream about my grandfather, just as, like, I'm still here. Like, aww. I'm still, like... So it's been, finding that power in, like, my ancestors and, the deities that I do choose to work with, or they choose me to work with, more importantly, finding my power in that solitary practice and fostering those relationships, because to me that's something that's sacred, that, you can share it with people, but, like, nobody can mess with that. No. Nobody can fluff with that. But, that's, for lack of a better term, like, unfuckwithable. Like, nobody can encroach or, mess up what I have created. Yeah. And for me, that's incredibly powerful.
No.
That's yours.
Yeah. It's especially, having past experiences where it was feeling very powerless and feeling, you don't have any foundation. Like, creating that foundation to be like, nah, I'm a bad bitch. Like, and having the reinforcement of, deities, ancestors, others, having, human community as well,
Yeah.
finding that strength to be like,
try me.
Yeah. Like, I got a whole fucking slew of shit that'll
Yeah.
rock
Yeah.
your world.
Yeah. So what do you, let's like rewind a little bit, because we had talked, you had mentioned earlier, like, the start of your practice.
Yeah.
So I was in 5th grade maybe, and so backstory, I never went to the same school twice until I was in high school. But I was in 5th grade, and somebody who I ended up reconnecting with later in life through social media, when her and I were in 5th grade, both of us were fascinated with like goth culture, and because we didn't know any better, we were both obsessed with Wicca. And both of us were obsessed with the thought of witchcraft, but we had no idea where to go.
Yeah.
We knew we felt these things. She always, like, I always have had a strong connection to the element of fire. Always. Ever since I was a little bitty baby bat. And she always had a really strong connection to, like, ice, like cold things. Like, that was her jam. It was kind of really funny that we found, like, each other, because it was like, fire and ice. George R. R. Martin, I know you were watching. But she always had, specifically for, like, ice and, like, airs, I guess, for lack of better words. Sorry, there's a lot of caffeine, and words are having a really hard time
There's
forming.
a lot of caffeine in my veins.
So exploring that, and then being told that was wrong, being raised Catholic, that wasn't right, I was going to hell, I was going to burn in this eternal lake of fire, or depending on what you believe, this eternal lake of ice, because in some beliefs, hell is cold rather than hot. But, you know, that whatever I was doing was inherently horribly wrong and forbidden. And then when I was 14 to 16, I got, you know, the chance to kind of dabble in it again, where I started furthering my practice, and that's when specifically the Nordic and Celtic, like, pantheons, deities, and cultures really started, like, being like,
hello.
Hey there.
Yeah.
And so I started getting some material on it. My mother, who is a whole other subject, one day went into my room and found all these materials. Had my brother, who's younger than me, take them out to the garbage, or put them in the garbage can, then take the garbage, like, out to the actual, like, garbage, so I couldn't retrieve them. And again, once I'm told I was inherently wrong, that it was forbidden, that I was going to hell, blah, blah, blah. Catholic guilt, Catholic guilt. And again, I was feeling more guilt than Catholic. And I was like, how can something that makes me feel this terrible be okay for me? And later in life, probably around 19, 20, I started talking with a friend of mine who was a witch. And, you know, it was like, okay, cool. I actually have somebody I can talk to about this. Because this was before really the internet was super accessible, and before, you know, those kind of avenues really existed. And it was like, cool, I have someone I can talk to about this. And the practices that she aligned herself with didn't really resonate with me. She did a lot of work with, like, angels and demons and having things do things for her. And I was like, this just doesn't feel right for me. So I didn't really get into asking her a whole lot. And then wasn't until I moved up here 6 years ago, literally about 2 days ago, 6 years ago, and where I found, like, okay, I can start focusing on me now. Like, I've had these pulls, I've had these, you know, inklings, I've done the research where I can, but I still don't really know what my practice is going to be. I know this is something that's called to me since I was literally a child. Where do I go from here? And finding another friend who is just kind of in that same boat where they're like, I know this has been calling to me, but she was raised Mennonite, and was just like, I know this is something that's called to me, but I don't know where to go from here. We went to her, like, Witchcraft 101 class, because we were like, are we doing this right? And then, like, in hindsight, like, there was no wrong answer. But it was just like what are we doing? Like, and it kind of solidified it to us that, like, we already knew pretty much what was in the class material, and we're like, oh. Like, it clicked for both of us. Now our paths have since like diverged and we've taken our own separate paths, but we come back together now and then. Like it's always really awesome to talk to her about what her craft and practice is, because hers is totally different than mine, and it's really awesome to just kind of like mingle and talk. But it's really nice to know that like it's come full circle from like being called to it as like literally, you know, an 8-year-old kid, and here I am at 28, finally like, all right, I finally figured it out. It literally took me 2 decades, but I'm here now. I'm here now, and we got it.
Well, I love what you said about, you know, it's like you had these past experiences and knowledge where you could accumulate it, but how did you take ownership of it?
Yeah, because I mean,
like what will be my practice?
I could read about it all day.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in a space that I felt safe enough to openly practice.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and even in my early 20s before I moved up here, the person, like even like relationships past my like familiar relationships, like romantic relationships, were either, you know, atheist or they weren't really, I guess, Christian for better, like they kind of believed in God, kind of didn't. They were very casual about their beliefs.
Yeah.
Either way, was not cool what I was putting down. So it's been like one of those like closeted things, and now it's just like, okay, like I have strength in what I have found, what I've accumulated over the past 20 years, and like putting it down on the fucking table.
Here it is.
I mean, I guess just kind of like, you know, to those who are watching, whether it be they are, you know, closeted in their experience, where they're kind of where I was and still kind of am, where it's like solitary to the point of being like a hermit.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. Like, you don't have to share your experiences with anyone. They can be your own to keep and to, you know, make sacred for you. But if you want to talk to about, you know, somebody, you can. Like, that is the wonderful thing about like social media and the internet.
Yes.
There's a lot of gatekeepers out there. They're horrible.
Yeah.
And they'll, you know, especially I found like in like the heathen communities, like they're the worst,
They
man.
really are.
They're the fucking worst.
Like they shouldn't be. I don't understand why.
Well, I not necessarily with gatekeeping, but I like what you said about even if you are open about your practice, I feel like there's always going to be some things or like some experiences that you had, or like some words or practices that you have that are going to feel very sacred.
Yeah.
And you don't have to share everything about it.
No.
But there are people out there to share with if you would like to.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's also a really awesome feeling to have, you know, the other practitioners, whether they be in that same path or a different path, that you can go to openly and be like, look what I did.
Yeah.
Or look what happened to me, or like, you know, let me tell you this awesome thing that happened. Like, I messaged Alyssa, I think, maybe 3 times after I started feeding these feral cats, and I was like, there's 1 female feral cat and then 2 boy feral cats, and the 2 boys are orange tabbies, the female's calico. Like, I see you, Mom. I see you.
Oh.
And now they live at my house forever.
Forever.
Did you name them?
Yeah. So Freckle, Balder, and Valravn. So, rewinding a little bit back to what brought me to my practice, or like what my practice is. You know, Alyssa, we were having a conversation about witch blood versus witch fire back of wine nights ago. And, you know, not necessarily, you know, the witch fire creating that witch blood. Because, I mean, it's not like a genetic thing that you pass down. Like, it's not, I had brown eyes and was a heathen, so my offspring are going to have brown eyes and are heathens. Yeah. Like, it's something that you either resonate with or you don't. And, I mean, it's fine if you don't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I don't know of any practicing witches in my family. Which isn't to say they don't exist, especially because my family traceably back came from Ireland. Like, hills and country and sheep and old magic Ireland.
Yeah.
So it might be because I still have family over there. But as the family that I do know, I don't have any practicing family members. So it's kind of creating that witch fire that we talked about, where I might not have any witch blood, but that doesn't make me any less of a witch because I don't have family members that were practicing as well.
When you said something when we were having that discussion too, that like I actually was like, huh.
You wrote
I'm
it
wine
down.
drunk, but I'm writing this down.
I don't remember what it
'Cause
was.
You said, you were like, well, who's to say that the witch fire within you doesn't create witch blood for the future? And I was like,
Yeah, that's what it was. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Drunk
like
me has
that.
some really profound thoughts.
Yeah.
Sober me doesn't ever remember them, but drunk me.
Well, apparently
Really?
drunk me writes them down, so I got
Written-
you.
written them down.
Together we
Written
make
them
the
down.
perfect pair.
To our coffee talk.
Thanks for coming to our coffee talk.
Coffee talk.
So, like, we're going to be doing more of these Interview with a Witch episodes. So, feel free to write in the comments what you want to know from our future guests, what kinds of questions that you have. You can also send them to us on Instagram, Faces of the Faceless.
Faceless.
Faces of the Faceless.
I'm gonna say, or I mean, if this provokes questions from people like as well, like if they have questions specifically about like working with the deities that you or I work with,
Yeah.
that would be.
Put them in the comments. We'll
Yeah.
get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please leave a
And
message after the beep.
To
Don't forget, like and subscribe
and hit that little bell.
to receive notifications anytime we post a new episode.
Bye.
Bye. Like I don't know what to say. Bye.